I'm an atheist, and why don't I discuss religion with a religious person? Well, as simple as that, there's nothing to be discussed there. The discussion itself is not going to be profitable for neither. And we have to complexify nowadays this kind of relation because it has come into fashion during the last years to have this sort of discussions. We have very famous people such as Alex O'Connor doing this kind of debates with religious people that I believe might not be really necessary at all, or at least in the way it is done, and there's a reason for that. I'll release another video about the history of atheism and more epistemological aspects of this, but anyway, I would probably say that me as an atheist, knowing everything we know from science nowadays, and social sciences nowadays, specifically anthropology, we can't deny that faith, which is different from religion, and I'll talk about this in the other video. Faith is a phenomenon that might be understood as being inherent part of human being or being human being. Because we are human beings, no matter how enlightened you are after the enlightenment, you believe you are scientific minded, but we are, in the root, animals, and ill-minded animals. To some point of our evolution, we were endowed with a layer of perception that might have brought, accidentally, a layer that gave us a burden to the knowledge of finitude. And once we are faced with it, as animals, we created infinite forms of symbolic relationship with this meaningful backdrop that is necessary for us to withstand this burden, this accidental burden, according to Cornelius Castoriadis. We are human beings that deal with the things in absentia all the time. In absentia meaning in Latin, the thing absent, the thing that is not present. And our minds, our animal minds, do that all the time. We talk to ourselves as a person. We have internal voices, the daimon, or the genius, daimon for the Greek culture, genius for the Roman Latin culture. The voice within, as Socrates says in his apology, in his defense and the tribunal, the voice that talks to him inside of himself, which is absolutely insane, if not imaginary. But nowadays we can't say scientifically that it's not inherent part of how our brain maps stuff and deals with stuff by creating human faces over this stuff. The unknown receives human faces. That is pretty much what gods are. And that is pretty much what gods are. Deities, all of them are humans, or at least anthropomorphized versions of animals or phenomena, meaning they all depart from a human perspective, and thus we project human faces on the universe in a way that we can communicate with us. And this all seems very abstract, but no one nowadays can deny that what we do when we are alone is talk to ourselves as if there was a self talking to us. We see this kind of symbolic behavior even in aesthetics and the way you fix or position things in your desk. There are aesthetical options, decisions, which ultimately means a symbolic ordering of the world towards an intention, which is absolutely imaginary. Nothing has the need to be anywhere. You are mapping the world with logic from within. That's why I prefer to call this the interface with the mystery. We have different interfaces with mystery, and these interfaces, which are the religare, the religion, the thing in between both dimensions, physical and spiritual or imaginary, these are historical creations as well as languages and follow certain rules that are historically created and maintained. And obviously religious as historical institutions, they are political institutions as well. So is the language. So religion is a formal language that respects codes, specific codes that supposedly allow us to communicate with the higher order, the universe of the ideas in a Platonic perspective, which is pretty much alive nowadays. The doxa, the common knowledge, is very deeply rooted into Platonic roots. So obviously science has a much more strict methodological way of building cumulative knowledge. Through experimentation, they are based on theories and philosophy like epistemology, the thinking about the thinking that creates both ends of this process, the theories and the methods. These are nothing but abstractions validated by the application of their results. So science, in fact, doesn't look for truth. Truth is a medieval concept that must be dead by now. There is no truth. There's only framing of specific phenomena to provide humanity with sufficient explanation or some sort of useful stuff at the end. The usefulness is very important because the concept of useful determines the effort and the direction of this effort. And obviously science provides us with practical stuff, usable stuff, things that work in a very specific framing, but it doesn't provide us any sort of knowledge about the meaning of things. But what happens to humanity if gods are taken down, as Nietzsche has diagnosed, and nothing is put in its place? What are we left with? And here I'm not talking about use of religion for government. In the spheres of politics, religion must be taken away in a practical way. In the social most level of this conversation, religion must be taken away from politics. This is obvious by now, although not so simple, because religion actually stems from politics. Religion is historical and political. But now we should obviously try to avoid to bring them together again. But as we start to gradually dig deeper into epistemology and the history of science, you learn more and more that this scientific way of looking at mysteries, which is nothing mystical, mysteries, they do exist. There's a boundary to which we can know, conceive things. We see that science is nothing but a consensus of a time, a paradigm, as Thomas Kuhn called it. A paradigm that belongs to a time, to a place. It might be changed along the way, as has been many times before in revolutions. The scientific revolutions such as Copernican, as Darwinian, as Freudian, which makes science a method, not an end, which will necessarily transform, meaning that the science that we have now is going to be laughable 50 years ahead. Although religions also change, the sense of faith doesn't. This characteristic necessity of our species to talk to the invisible. So that's why there's no discussion about this. These are two different ways or interfaces with the mystery. One of those, religion, might be creating an imaginary mapping over phenomena that helped us understand and deal with phenomena. And it took way longer to come to similar conclusions to some extent. As I was saying in the mapping of the movements of planets, they were all made during a time in which they believed, like Kepler did, that the movements of the planets were entangled with deeper meanings of the universe, in an enchanted universe as an open book waiting to be deciphered. And the other one, a more practical and fast way of knowing or dealing with things. The science as we know it is nothing but a framing of much bigger phenomena to which we can't explain yet. Bigger natural phenomena from which we slice smaller useful parts but don't quite understand them yet, which might be ultimately impossible to be understood by the simple reason that we are animals on the surface of a small planet and the periphery of a small galaxy, and the universe doesn't allow us with explanations. Well, that's it for today. I hope you liked. Don't forget to follow. Some people watch and don't follow, and also give it a like because the algorithms that govern us, they do like it. And I see you in the next one.